items from council office. We'll start with Resolution 5-2023, resolution celebrating the 150-year anniversary of the Columbus Metropolitan Library and the opening of the new Gahanna branch. Ms. Bowers, turn things over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Weaver. I am excited to present this resolution for consideration by the body. Mr. Van Meter and I were able to get some content from the communications department at Columbus Metropolitan Library, and using that along with some history that we had about the Gahanna Library, I put together this resolution. Mr. Van Meter was a wonderful collaborator and contributor, and Mr. Weaver also gave it a once-over for grammar, so thank you to both of you. Before we get into the substance of the resolution, if there are any comments, I did want to mention that we also asked Kristen Sutton with the Columbus Metropolitan Library if we could present this resolution as a group to leadership at CML as part of the grand opening on March 4th. And the response we got back is if those of us who can attend the grand opening on March 4th, if we could meet a little bit before the formal ribbon cutting ceremony, closer to 8:45, we can do a presentation and do photos with the CEO, Pat Lazinski, and branch manager Nate Oliver, and I know I'm excited about celebrating the employees there as well. So if you could please join earlier before the 9 a.m. formal ceremony, we'll be able to do a presentation of this resolution. The expectation is that we would pass it first, and then instead of having a presentation at regular council meeting, we would do the presentation as part of their ribbon cutting ceremony.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Any comments from my colleagues? Yeah, Ms. McGregor.
Would it be appropriate to put in here somewhere that Gahanna resident Mike Soriano was the designer of the building?
That would be great.
That's a great idea,
Yeah.
Ms. McGregor.
I don't know where, but I mean, would that be?
I mean, my proclamation, but it's okay.
What?
It's in my proclamation. But sending the message twice is good.
I mean, it's probably appropriate place somewhere to tuck that in that, you know.
Looks like Lori's already done that. Thumbs up. Yeah, that is
Sure.
a good idea.
Yeah, I can work a sentence in and have that ready for us on agenda next week.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I think it was in the back of my brain and I missed it coming out into the draft content.
Well, thank you, Ms. Bowers and Clerk Van Meter, for your efforts on that. Any other comments on the resolution? So did you want it to come back to committee or just for?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
In order for the timing to be right, I think we have to pass it on the 20th because then we'll have it for the 4th. So because it's not being presented for vote, it will not need to be amended. But new language with those additions and recognizing the donors for whom the library is named after.
Yeah, that should probably be in there.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yep, we'll recognize them as
million
well. I know,
plus.
they're very generous,
They're
very generous.
Very generous, oh, gosh.
Okay, I'll add in another paragraph about referencing those 2 points, so, and have that for consent agenda next week.
Consent work?
Okay.
All right, consent to that. All right, item C, items from the Senior Director of Operations.
Who's that? Oh,
Mr. Schultz, good to see you.
So I had to look up to see the last time I was here presenting 825 Tech Center Drive to you folks, and it's been, I mean, everybody will guess that I was just here a couple weeks ago, but that's actually not true. The last time I was actually here was October when we actually hired MSA, our design architect. And I guess I'm here for 2 reasons. Today, I'm here to give you an update on 825 Tech Center Drive and where we are with the design process. That's the first item, and then the second item is the wrong screen, so that doesn't really help you much. And the second item is going to be the CMAR contract, or the construction manager contract. Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds here. There we go. So thank you for coming or having me before council here to give an update on the 825 Tech Center Drive design process. Just by way of, for information purposes right now. So what our plan is as administration is we plan to be here at the first committee of the whole meeting every month until, I don't want to say until we move in because there's a little bit of time there, but as we work all the way up to and through construction. So there'll be a regular or monthly report that will give on the status of where we are with the design as we work into the construction season and such. So with that, I just have a few slides as to where we are today. But basically, the project team is made up of, the daily project team is made up of the mayor, President Renner sits on that board with us, chief of police, Senior Director of Administrative Services, the Parks and Recreations Director, the Planning Director, the Clerk of Courts, and myself. We work with the design architect on basically a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, in order to bring this building and the design up out of the ground. And a lot of the departments that are represented are public-facing departments, but then we also have, obviously, a good mix of folks, including the PD, that are involved in the overall schematic design of the building at this particular point in time. I will note right up first and foremost is there will be focus groups where, council as an example will be brought in to discuss council chambers, to discuss the offices, and then there'll be other focus groups to discuss, the engineering department and how that functions and flows inside of the building as we get deeper and deeper into the design process here. But the first thing that the architect really walked us through is what are the objectives of our project and what do we want to see 825 Tech Center Drive become. And what you're seeing up here on the screen are basically the 10 or 12 different objectives that the group really talked around and really came up with. Just to highlight a couple of them, but to create a clear and civic presence, the second bullet on there, create a community and service-focused facility, right? Is it a warm and welcoming facility? So when members of the public come to this facility, do they have a certain amount of ownership as taxpayers when they enter the building? What do they feel? Is it warm and welcoming? Is it inviting to them? But then at the same time, is it safe and secure for the employees that work in it on an everyday basis, whether they're a police officer or a member of the administration, a member of the senior center staff that come here, that come and would interact with the facility on a regular basis. But then the other part that was important to the group as we were discussing and working through some of the design options was to the building and rebranding and the unique identity of the facility itself. And we'll get into some of this as we discuss. But basically what we're looking at here on this next slide is the site. Obviously our building is in the almost the middle of the screen here. But when we were talking about the site itself, there were a couple of key elements that popped out at us, and I'm just going to highlight some of them as we go. But the wooded area, while we don't own the wooded area and we don't control the wooded area is seen as a resource to the site itself. It's always nicer to look at trees than concrete surfaces. I guess if you work downtown, Mr. Weaver, that's an inviting environment as well. But there are certain parts and pieces of this particular environment that we want to kind of maximize. We did also highlight the two drainage features on the facility, which are highlighted in blue on the map here. There's a mature drainage facility on the southern portion of the property, and we want to try and maximize and maintain that as a resource as best we can. There are tremendous sightlines. If anybody, I'm sure you've all driven up Tech Center Drive since we've purchased this building and recognized that beacon on the hill, if you would. That is 825 Tech Center Drive and will be obviously our future home. So how do we maximize those sightlines? How do we maximize those sightlines as the building is reconstructed, renovated, and then expanded? At the same time, there's a big multi-use trail that runs along Tech Center Drive that is frequently used. Every time I'm at Tech Center Drive, which is probably at least about once a week at this point, and if it's at any time during lunchtime, there are always people walking up and down that trail and actually even using our property to walk and recreate during the lunch hour. So we also see that as a resource. We've already talked to the architect about potentially, our parking lot on a Saturday afternoon being used as a trailhead so that people and families can utilize and access that corridor more effectively. At the same time, we also discussed, or have been discussing, some of the issues and challenges that we have with the site. The example that you see on the screen in the red arrow is that big old laneway that basically is probably a 60-mile-an-hour runway right into the front of the building. So how do we secure the building in a way to make sure that it's not vulnerable from outside influences, as an example? The other thing that we also noted as we were discussing some of these things is that there's this overall look and feel of these big W's if you look at them from the sky. How do we rebrand the building, if you would, so that it gives the city of Gahanna and a municipal complex a different look and feel than just an overall 100,000 square foot building? The purple dots obviously represent a very unique look, or not a very unique look throughout the area. But as we see in the next couple slides here, you'll see some of the things that we've been discussing from a design standpoint. So what the design architect basically is charged with doing is going away and giving us a variety of different options in order for us to imagine the site in the configurations that work best for us. I'll catch up on my notes here real quick. So the first thing that we really did was they put these massing studies in front of us with a variety of different options. As you can see, there's 6 options on the board. We've seen other options since. There are some options that we did not spend very much time on. Number 4 there is it says separate police facility. So that is actually a separate building than what we would want to construct. And options like that didn't get very much airtime or very much conversation as we were sitting in these meetings. But basically where we landed when we started going through these options in pretty great detail was we landed with option 1, 5, and 6. And we like different elements about each one of them for a variety of different reasons. The next couple slides here will go into a little bit greater detail on those options. I apologize, they're a little bit tiny and they're a little bit, well, you'll see. They're a little bit tiny, but we're basically, so the project objectives is what you see up there in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. A black dot represents that criteria being satisfied. A half dot, like the 4th bullet down there, is only half satisfied or partially satisfied. And then a dot that is not filled in at all, which happens to not be an option on this particular one, is a criteria that wasn't satisfied at all. But basically what we're looking at in this particular arrangement, where we have the blue portion of the blue expansion portion of the building off the back, I will note right up front that we didn't like the fact that that portion sits on the existing drainage feature on the site that we were looking to maximize. However, it does build a very nice lobby off of the front of the building that is extremely welcoming to folks coming to visit us. It also gives us some opportunity to build, if you notice in this particular chambers, we have two double high ceilings. We're in that particular facility currently, as it exists currently. There are no double high ceilings. So this would be a space where we would be able to, potentially construct a council chambers that was more similar to this room as opposed to fitting into the facility that's out there. Which is very difficult to see on this slide here, but more easily seen on my particular screen. The different colors represented, this is the first floor plan, the first floor plan, which then identifies different departments and such, and how they would be organized throughout the building. That is getting into greater detail as we move through some of this process. This here was option 5 on the previous slide. And what you see in this particular option is a very clear navigation throughout sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. Very clear navigation throughout the front of the building. You see that blue L in front of the building, if you would. That gives the public and gives the staff that separation that's critical in securing the facility. So basically, in this particular instance, the public would be allowed into the blue area, the blue L, not the blue area on the right, the new portion on the right, but the blue area to traverse the building and go to a variety of different services that they might be looking for, whether it was to go to the senior center, pay a utility bill, pay a parking ticket, or come to this council meeting at this particular point in time. You can see the criteria, the project objectives in the upper right-hand corner there. They have changed considerably as we walk through this particular process. And then option number 5, and this is, option number 6. This is the option where we began to focus some more attention because it met some of the same criteria that we've seen in the other previous 2 examples here. What I will show you on the upper left-hand portion of that schematic, that would be the area of the senior center with a small addition on the front side of that particular building. We would continue the L-shaped corridor throughout the front of the building. And then the big space on the right-hand side of the building would be the police department expansion. So basically, after this first workshop and a half, we basically told the architect, okay, we'll go back, shake up the puzzle pieces, and then begin to present the options to us. And this is an iterative process that we go through over and over and over again until we get to a schematic that meets 99% of the objectives and that everybody feels comfortable with at that point. So our last workshop, which was last Wednesday, they went over some massing strategies, some more massing strategies, 1 through 4 here, and they were highlighting different parts and pieces of the particular facility. So the first picture there in the upper left-hand corner is the public circulation and entry of the building. As I pointed out earlier, that L shape in the front, right, that's where the public would interact with the variety of staff and do business within the building itself. There's also double high ceiling again, so the lobby is much more inviting, much more welcoming to somebody coming into a municipal facility, something that they would expect. The next drawing to the right, required double high ceilings, which I've already spoke about. But those double high ceilings would be present in the 3 blue portions of the building there, not only in the senior center on the front of the building on the left side, but in the area off of the front of the building and for the lobby. And then that back portion is for different sally ports and different garage spaces that the police department requires for securing vehicles and such. And then number 3 in the lower left-hand corner is to isolate those sensitive functions, namely the police department. So can we secure the police department in a way where there's good access to the building by the public, but no access through hard and soft lobbies, if you would, into the facility, and gain the things that we don't currently have across the street. So in the end of last week's session, this is where we ended up. What's a little bit hard to see on the screen again, when you guys get the slides in front of you, you'd see the expansion areas of the building, and then you'd see the existing building. At this particular point in time, what we're really going to do is we're going to begin to squeeze that orange, if you would, and make it a whole lot smaller, because right now, even to the naked eye, you guys are saying, well, you're building a whole lot bigger building than you told us we were building. And that's intentional on the architect's side. The architect wants to start big and then be able to whittle away and get us down and get us to a satisfied space program that is amenable to us as an administration, you guys as a council, and ultimately to the taxpayer's budget, right? Because that's really ultimately space drives, renovated space drives budget, and then expansion space drives budget as well. So you also notice on this particular plan in the upper left-hand corner of the site, as it enters Tech Center Drive, we've eliminated that long raceway that goes into the front of the building by adding an access point. If you also notice, that could be a very nice, neat laneway for the police department to access their secured parking, which is on the left-hand side of the picture here. We've reoriented the parking lot in front of the building, adding some island spaces and such, so somebody could not just drive from Tech Center Drive all the way to the front of the building. And then also secured it, those little rectangles in the front of the building, ballards and those other types of safety mechanisms that would protect the building. The big factor here is that the back side of the building remains untouched. So that parking lot as it exists today and the way in which you access Tech Center Drive would remain 100% the same, and the drainage area that is on the southern portion of the property would also remain untouched as well. So as we go through this process, again, this is an iterative process where we go in, we sit down, they present us material, they go away, we sit back down again, and they present us different materials based on the conversation and the feedback that we're having. This is ultimately to get us down to a design that maximizes the program that you guys have all seen. So we'll continue. The next steps are really to continue to refine those new spaces, if you would, define the renovated spaces inside. So what are the departmental adjacencies that are necessary for efficient use of operations? Does it make sense for the planning department, which is planning, building, zoning, and all those things, to be in 3 different parts of the building? No, absolutely not. So let's put them together. How does mayor's court interact with council chambers as the courtroom on a Thursday afternoon? And really begin to flesh out those other examples. We'll be doing some benchmarking. So benchmarking is nothing but going and visiting some of our neighbors who have like facilities, and basically looking at what does 1,200 square feet look like and what can you put in it. If anybody can tell me the size of this room, I would be impressed. Tom's not included in that conversation. He's not allowed to bet. But how many people, what's the capacity of this room, and is it sufficient, or does it need to be bigger and or smaller in order to accommodate an average meeting that we might have in here, right? So we'll go and do that benchmarking, and that'll really advise the program in a great and tremendous way. From there, we'll have some focus groups like we talked about. We'll sit with you folks and discuss, again, council chambers in particular, council office in particular, caucus rooms, law libraries, and things that we might have in this facility that honestly might not make the cut, if you would, and that's up to you guys in a new facility. And again, those other focus groups, police officer focus groups and such, staff focus groups, senior focus groups, those folks will all be included in the design process here. This process here, so the schematic design process, with the process that we're currently in, will run through March and potentially linger into April to a certain degree. But at that point, now we can begin to see exactly not exactly what the building is going to look like, but we have a very, very, very good idea as to what the exterior surfaces look like, what that parking lot might look like in the future. And from there, we then roll into the design phase, the ultimate design phase, where we're actually, not constructing walls, but we're putting walls on paper and identifying different offices for different people and for different functions, and really understanding the flow and function of the building, which ultimately then gets us to about an October timeframe for construction on this particular project to begin. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different meetings and conversations and emails, and a lot of moving parts at this particular point in time. And a lot of questions at the same time. So with that, I'll make sure I didn't forget anything and open it to you guys for some questions.
Thank you, Director. Yes, Mrs. Angela.
Are the police department not going to be in their own place, or is it going to be attached to this? And the same thing with the senior citizens? I thought they were each going to have like their own.
They're standalone spaces. They'll have standalone spaces within the building, but they will be attached to the existing structure.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Was that what was
Yes.
there to begin with?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I didn't get that.
Well, and one of the reasons why when we were discussing those 6 options that I talked about in the
Yeah.
separate police facility, we know that constructing a separate police facility with different HVAC systems and other security and other parts and pieces, it adds to the security that we need to construct our facility with, because now you need 2 storm shelters as an example. So the price grows exponentially when we talk about having separate standalone buildings. That is one of the things that the architect did talk about, maybe in the first kickoff meeting that we had. Can we have, what are your feelings about having a separate senior center versus a separate police department? If we could fit things within the budget, that would be good, but I think the reality in building the size police department that we need, it needs to be attached to the building.
Yeah, okay, thanks, because I thought that was kind of what the theory was, but this looks perfectly good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. McGregor.
Yes. Originally, I thought the Sally Port was going to be, and the police auxiliary business was going to be a different place than you're showing them, but is there still going to be room for a gun range?
Yep.
Okay.
So this includes, the conversation that's going on currently is to have an excavated basement. It would serve as a storm shelter, emergency communications center. The firing range would be down there with proper ventilation and those types of things from modern construction standards. But the gym, the workout facility, the gym, the tactical mats and those things would also be in the basement, drop-in weights and other gunfire. Be more appropriate in the basement just from a sounding standpoint. But yeah, there would be a firing range in the basement. And the basement would only be under the far left-hand portion of the picture that's on the screen. Yes, ma'am.
To follow up on that point, could you speak to the need or why we're incorporating firing range, why the current process isn't working, and why that's being incorporated here? Thanks, Chief.
Just a little bit of historical perspective. In our existing facility, we did have a range but dating back to the original construction in the early 70s when it was remodeled in 92. Moving forward in the mid-2000s, we found out that the HVAC system within the building was essentially recirculating the lead from the range. Those two systems were essentially cross-contaminating each other. So since the mid-2000s, we've not had a range. It's one of the most perishable skills. It's also one of the most, you know, obviously the not only a perishable skill, but one of the most serious things that we engage in from a training perspective. We spend an inordinate amount of time in travel and expense related to either renting range facilities, traveling to those facilities. That's lost time. And frankly, every time we travel to another location, that's time that if we were in our own facility, that we're on the range. Also, we have to schedule time at other facilities. So we don't have the ability just to pull people off a shift for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, do some quick qualification or quick training. So it's adding exponentially to our costs. And again, one of the most perishable skills. I can tell you, I've been doing this job for 31 years, you know, and I'm not as proficient as I would like to be. And the benefits of being able to be within our own facility, having our own range staff, having our own control over that range complex, and being able to go down there and train amongst ourselves without competing for other agency time is invaluable. And I can tell you those are very, very perishable skills, and with the expectation that we are the best at firearms handling and our ability to deploy those weapons in situations that training is of the utmost.
Go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit just to the certification process and why this is a skill that officers need access to practice?
So the state requires that we qualify annually. There's some minimum qualification requirements that the state mandates for us, and that's all of our weapon systems. That's our handguns, our rifles, our shotguns. There are individual qualification standards for each one of those firearms, so that's multiple times on a range. That's the state minimum. We've never really trained to minimum standards here, so we spend an additional time, have additional qualifications throughout the calendar year and within our for in-service training. So there are additional standards that we've imposed upon ourselves, upon the agency, to increase that proficiency. So that, again, that's more time and more hours that we devote internally to make sure that we're not just meeting that minimum qualification standard, that we're exceeding it.
And just one more, do you expect that access to our own range is going to change the focus of a de-escalation and a community-based policing department that we currently have?
Yeah, having our own training spaces, and I just don't want to focus on the range. That's a critical component because we spend an inordinate amount of time, but also in our in-service training. We have to travel for that. We're going over to 400 West Johnstown. We're going to other facilities for our in-service training. The bulk of our training is on those things: constitutional policing, de-escalation, emergency response tactics, and all of those things that the communities come to expect. So that's just one component. Unfortunately, that's the most expensive component, and that's the most perishable skill that we have. So that will not change. It will, in fact, enhance our ability, again, as I mentioned, pull people off. If we've got a number of people working on the street, we can pull one or two just during a shift and do a quick 20-minute or 30-minute firearms training. It's going to increase our proficiency, and it's going to increase our skill level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. McGregor.
I was just going to say, it also is like, it's not just like, when you go to a range and you shoot at a target, it's not just shooting at a target. You would have the ability to set up scenarios and
Absolutely.
move, and shooting on the move and behind barriers and different things that you don't always have at a range.
Yeah, absolutely. The old facility was very cramped. We had very little room. Modern range facilities are wider. As Mrs. McGregor mentioned, we're able to set up scenarios to transition from, say, a firearm to a less lethal type of device like a taser. We see a lot, not to editorialize a lot, but one of the basic principles in policing is contact and cover. And we've seen some things in situations around the country where that contact and cover principle is not repeatedly trained, and that's to have one officer make contact with an individual, another officer provide cover. Those are things that you can do in a wider, more expansive range facility. So you're not just practicing shooting rounds down range. You're practicing those transition skills to identify the threat. If the threat's no longer a lethal threat, to transition to a less lethal device, or maybe hands-on, or some other force option, or completely de-escalate and separate the situation. So all of those things have to be done in a controlled environment, having a range of width and length to allow us to move freely. There's also a safety component to all of that. We have to do those things in a safe environment for our officers. So yes, I would say those will give us all of those options. Right now, we have to go outside. We're doing things. It's just not an ideal situation because we have to, for a better term, cobble together some of those exercises where in our own facility we would have all of those materials readily available. We can do it with much greater ease, speed, efficiency, and it's going to save money.
Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to dovetail a little bit with you. Since we're talking about facilities, I think we got detracted a little bit about the shooting range, which is definitely a necessary thing. But Chief, would you say that the facilities, since we're talking about facilities, the space that you need would provide ample space for all the different types of training that the community asks for our police to do?
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't want to focus, just that is a key component. The range is a key component to this facility. There are other training spaces that are just as important. When it comes to us being able to host classes, bring people in, we send 4 officers to, critical incident team training. That's 4 officers away from the city when we can bring those 20 or 25 from different agencies and host it within our facility. And really, 825 is if you think we've got hotels right next door, we've got restaurants, we've got access to an airport. From a regional training perspective for these courses around the country, University of Louisville and all those that do hosted trainings at facilities all over the United States, what a perfect location. I mean, it's fantastic. And that will help us be able to host those trainings. We're not sending officers. We're not paying for those travel expenses. We'll still have some of that, but we will be able to be more of a host agency. So I just, from a training perspective, this provides us a whole new level. And some of the things that, like the Citizen Police Academy, we've got it. COVID, we took a hit in that program. We're working on bringing that back in a couple of different iterations. Being able to do that within our own house not only showcases the city, but it also showcases some of, for those of you that have gone through it, understand some of the ability for us to, walk people through all of the training that our officers go through and kind of do that in a mini course. And I think it really gives people a perspective of some of the things that we do at much greater detail. And a lot of that is de-escalation and recognizing various situations. So yeah, I believe this is going to kind of set the bar for us regionally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. Any other questions on the general facilities update before we go to, yes, Mrs. Padova.
Thank you. I have a question about the senior center. What is the size of this one compared to what we have currently?
You asked me too quick. I think the design space in this particular facility, 825, is about 8,500 to 9,000 square feet, and we're dealing with about 5,500 or 6,000 square feet of functional, not just functional space over there, but that includes their storage and everything. That building over there, I think if you included the foyer, is about 6,900 square feet.
And is it just one floor, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the senior center would be on the ground floor.
And would having it connected like it is here, is it still going to be able to be like rented out and?
Yeah, so those are some of the
as it
things
is
that
over
we've
here.
talked about as far as that senior space goes. The facility could be secured in a way where you could have a renter actually access the building in a lot more meaningful way than they even currently do, where they don't have access to the whole entire facility, but only basically the rented hall, if you would, in the kitchen
Okay.
to prepare catering and those types of things. So that's part of the discussion that's currently going on.
And so it looks like the door, like there would be a separate door just for the senior center there in the front. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so there's really three, we talked about three entrances, not necessarily on the back for staff, but on the front, senior center entrance, or one that's closest to the senior center, one in the middle of the building, which would be the general city hall entry, and then a separate entry for the police department on the far side of the building.
Thank you.
I really think that it's necessary to have that much bigger, and I know that the seniors have been, I think, coming in and saying that, and I'm hopefully getting a bigger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That number is, I don't want to say rock solid, but it's that 8,000 to 9,000 square feet is pretty solid in the space program at this point.
Okay, thank you, Director Schultz. Do you want to tackle
I'll just
the
keep-
ordinance?
Keep moving right on
All
along,
right.
all right? Why not, right? So when we were here back in October, we talked about the design architect, and at that particular point in time, I said there would be one more key piece to the puzzle, and that would be to hire a construction manager, and the construction manager basically builds the project that the architect designs. So we're here tonight to ultimately ask you guys for some authorization to hire that construction manager. But basically on October 6th, we released a request for proposal. The request for proposal had basically two different sets of criteria in it. We had a pre-construction phase. Pre-construction phase includes things like doing budgeting for this particular project and scheduling, identifying long lead term items. So things like generators and elevators and electrical switching equipment and things that currently are seeing a supply chain issue and things that would ultimately impact the schedule. The construction manager at risk would identify those items as we begin to walk through this particular process with the design folks. They would pre-qualify contractors who would ultimately work on the project. And then they would ultimately be establishing at the end of phase one or the pre-construction phase a guaranteed maximum price, and that's where you get the at-risk portion of the service. So basically, they're saying that construction for this particular project will cost us no more than X number of dollars. We will agree to that, and if it costs them $1 more to construct it, that's on them. That's their at-risk portion of the project. Okay, so there will be more than one GMP established for this particular project. There will be a GMP to establish a long lead term item so that we can get those on order, if you would. Things like HVAC, again, generators, electrical switching equipment. The items that they identify, I mean, these folks being the professionals that they are, they know just how long it takes to get a generator. From what we've heard, a generator could take almost as much as 12 to 13 months in order to get on site to be installed. Obviously, those things impact the ultimate schedule in which we would need to construct the facility. So you guys would most likely see two GMPs presented to you. When GMPs are presented, they are presented as an amendment to the contract that you are going to ultimately vote on, that I'm here presenting for you guys tonight. So basically, we're only presenting phase one of the contract. I'm presenting it as one complete unit, though, because ultimately that's where we get as we get further down the road into the process. Phase two of the project is actually the bidding and awarding, the construction management, the permitting and inspecting, and ultimately that post-construction and warranty phase of the project. So they bring the project up out of the ground once the architect is done designing it and it's ready to be built. They hire the subcontractors as an example there. So as part of the process, we received 4 different proposals from what our architect told us. We got the 4 best construction management companies to bid on this particular project for scale and scope. Those proposals were evaluated by our internal committee, the same committee that identified MSA as the architect. Being that we only got 4 proposals, we thought it was prudent to interview and shortlist all 4 of those folks. So we had them in this particular room for a presentation of their services. The median price point of all of those 4 proposals was $3.742 million. And as another number, the difference between the high vendor and the low vendor was just under $400,000. So they all pretty much hit it, all within a magnitude of about $400,000 or about 10%, 8% of their listed price. So what the committee shortlisted, or not shortlisted, but our preferred vendor became Alfred Construction. They are a locally owned and operated construction management company. They have some similar experience to our MSA partners. And if anybody was to go and look back at our slide or the slide that I presented for hiring of MSA, you are going to actually see the same, 5 bullets that are up there. They have multiple business sector experiences, so they have built projects across every industry that you guys can imagine. They have great governmental project experience. They have renovation and expansion project experience, again, not just for the private sector, but also for municipal government. They assemble teams. They assemble the best teams, and we'll get into that on the next slide, to actually build the project. And the importance of relationships was very much stressed in their interview with us. So when we look at their particular set of services, so we basically have in the top portion of that triangle there, we have the design process. They sit with us in the design process, and they worry about primarily 2 things. They worry about budget, and they worry about schedule. Okay, so again, they all identify those long lead time items, but they'll also basically say, well, and I don't know what the hot material is right now, but you've chosen some really crazy material, and it's going to increase your budget by $1 million. So you really want to purchase that particular material. And we'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with them as the design gets configured. We'll go around in this continuous circle, and they will budget and rebudget and budget again to make sure that we're ultimately hitting the numbers that we need to hit, and the numbers that we talked to you folks about when we were going through the, the portion of the project from a few months back where we were purchasing the building. Once that will ultimately get them to those GMPs, those guaranteed maximum prices, and from there they will bid the job, and they will hire. This is not everybody that they're going to hire on the screen now, but they're going to hire the folks that are going to build the building from a construction standpoint, make the walls, build the walls, the electricians to run the wires, the plumbers to run the plumbing, the HVAC folks, the technology folks, so on and so forth, and that list goes on and on. One of the things, or 2 of the things that they talked about in their interview was having a public engagement process. And when we say engagement, that's kind of a tough word, and I don't know of a better one, that's why I used it. But the public engagement process is can we get some high school interns, as an example, that want to investigate the construction management trade as a potential career opportunity. So they would potentially be brought on board to work on our project alongside with the construction manager. STEM type programming that they may offer to, like a Boy Scout troop on a Saturday afternoon, where the Boy Scout troop can come in and tour the facility, get on their little hard hats and their Bob the Builder type stuff, and walk the facility and see a facility come up out of the ground like this one would, because we are in a unique situation. This is a public facility that we're building. We're not building a private building. So can we bring the community on board? What are those communication strategies with the community, and how do we communicate things like ribbon cutting ceremony? Well, ribbon cuttings, those are a little bit further down the road. How about groundbreaking ceremonies first and foremost, to ribbon cutting ceremonies and those types of things? But the other thing, and I think the thing that's probably more important, is they would like to set a DEI goal and objective for this particular project. DEI being, again, defined as minority, woman-owned, veteran-owned small businesses, not just in the region, but one of the things that we would add to that is locally owned as well, and Gahanna-based businesses in order to construct our project. So right now we do have a loose goal of 10 to 15% of DEI on the overall construction, the subcontractors, if you would, that they would bring in and that they pre-qualify. Obviously, if we can get that number closer to 20, that would be great. And talking to Nate about this particular number, our economic development director, he thought that a 10 to 15% goal at this particular point was a very good goal. But with the understanding that obviously, again, these folks know the biggest and best players in order to bring this project to fruition and what those impacts are across the board. So at this particular point, phase one of this particular contract is $87,500. That is for their pre-construction services. When you guys actually, when this contract goes through approval, you're only voting at that particular point in time on the pre-construction services or the $87,500. I list phase two services there because in essence, when we get to GMPs, we'll be presenting back before you authorization for construction administration services at $1.4 million, general conditions at $89,000, and then fees, bonds, insurance, and contingencies, fees being what it costs to actually build the building, at 5% of the construction cost, that ultimately that 5% of that 5.5%, sorry, that 5.5% of the GMP. I've had those same looks, Mr. Weaver. It's like, my goodness, I'm not 100% sure. One of the things that we did do with the assistance of our city attorney and some third-party counsel was to review this contract in total. Third-party counsel was extremely helpful, along with Mr. Malarski, in making sure that the city's best interests are at hand and at heart in this particular contract. No offense to Mr. Ray sitting over there, but I don't know that we would have gotten through it as quickly as we did without third-party counsel.
Right. That's why I brought him in.
Absolutely. Yes, so with this action, this administration is respectfully requesting an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Alfred Incorporated for construction manager at risk services related to the renovation and expansion of 825 Tech Center Drive with emergency and waiver. The reason for the emergency and waiver is so that they can begin budgeting and scheduling this project as soon as possible and not wait another minute. Because again, that time becomes money and will impact the schedule at this time. So with that, I can take some questions on Alfred's construction manager at risk services.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, I was trying to follow through some of these contracts, and I wanted to make sure I understood what I was reading. It looks like paragraph 7.2.1, prevailing wages, is being deleted. Is that true? It may be just a format. And ultimately, that's not really my question, because I want to make sure that prevailing wages or some sort of wages are actually being paid. But I also want to make sure if the option is that we're sidetracking that, what do we know about the wages of the different laborers?
Prevailing wage will be paid. It has to be paid.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so it's just a format error. It looks like it's being deleted, but it's not. This, I should probably be specific. This, yeah, 7.2.1, it's the document, it's got a strange name. A133-2019 standard form between owner.
Yep. That is the main AIA, American Institute of Architects, standard contract in which the Alfred and Ray and the third party went through and reviewed.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
I'm trying.
So that, but then that, Ray, you're saying that paragraph is not being deleted, it's just sort of looks like it? Or there's something before got deleted or something?
7 point what?
Yeah, sorry. Section 7.2.1.
I think you're referring to the parentheses that says paragraph deleted.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why that's in there. That paragraph is not being deleted.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really my question. Thank you.
Other questions from colleagues? Yeah, Mrs. Bowers. Ms. Bowers.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for walking us through this. Could you tell me a little bit more? You mentioned that October 6th, the RFP was released, and that then you went through the evaluation and scoring process of the 4 responses that were received. Could you walk us through the timeline after when responses were received and kind of where we go from where that went?
So responses were received week before Thanksgiving. Interviews were held the week after Thanksgiving. We shortlisted, so the week after, I'm sorry, I'm looking for a calendar for November. Yeah, so the week of Thanksgiving was November 21st. We interviewed the week of November 28th. We ended up shortlisting December 9th. And we actually shortlisted a different vendor. And that vendor, we were not fostering the level of a relationship that we needed to foster on this particular project. And therefore, we chose to, as a committee, we voted unanimously to switch directions and go with our, really what I would refer to as, and I think the other committee members in the room would refer to as our 1B. The first contractor that we shortlisted, we felt they may have slightly better experience in building a public safety facility. But again, it was a 1A and a 1B, and there was a very large conversation that we had in the committee room that day about, you know, would it be the first contractor that we shortlisted or Ilford themselves? But then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we made the decision that we needed to switch directions. I first reached out to the first contractor December 9th to basically make them our preferred vendor. And when we chose to switch directions, I still did not have a draft contract that was executable or being able to be presented before you folks. In help with Mr. Malarski and the third-party attorney and the Elford attorneys, we turned around the contract in 4 days.
Right. And Mr. Schultz and Mr. Malarski with our outside counsel, I know worked diligently for about 6 weeks to try to get a finalized contract with the preferred vendor. And just we're not getting to where we needed to be. And we already have identified at the outset that we have a very aggressive timeline with this. And right now with the construction market, every day that we don't move forward is a day that costs us. And we want to be very cognizant around the fact that we are spending taxpayer dollars. This is a huge public investment. And that was why, as a committee, we unanimously decided that we needed to move in a different direction. And as Mr. Schultz just shared, within 2 days, 4 days? 4 days. Had a contract buttoned up and done.
So just to talk a little bit about process, because there is waiver and emergency requested here, and I think that, and this is no criticism of the administration. This is a discussion because we, as elected public servants, have a duty to constituents, and especially on large-scale projects like this, need to be very cognizant about the process in which we're doing things. And I know you all are very cognizant of that process as well. So I understand. So waiver is an easy one, right? Waiver is we just don't have a second reading, and we would vote on it at next week's committee meeting or council meeting, regular
Correct.
council meeting.
Correct.
Emergency would curtail the 30-day window under which a constituent could potentially file, or anyone could potentially file a claim to stop us moving forward on this. Practically speaking, though, that rarely happens. And practically speaking, does that stop us from, does not having an emergency, so we vote on it next week, hypothetically we pass it next week, does passing it with waiver but not emergency create any actual delay in this contract?
So in this particular instance, I say absolutely. Our schematic design is supposed to close end of March, early April. And if this construction manager at risk service does not begin immediately, then we fail to begin to identify long lead time items timely. It's establishing that first GMP And it ultimately puts us that 30 days behind, absolutely. Back when we did the design architect, given the holidays, the design architect, honestly, probably, it didn't really cost us as much. But in this particular instance, this one definitely cost us time because of the fact that these folks schedule and budget our project. And this is what they go through on an iterative basis, time and time and time again, as we sit with the design architect.
So back up one step further.
Yep.
They submit an invoice to, we pass this next week. They submit an invoice to us for the first phase one, the $87,000, right? Does not passing it with emergency mean that we cannot pay that invoice?
The mayor cannot sign that contract until the 30 days expires.
Okay.
Which means they cannot begin the work until I'm signed the contract.
And if I may add, by emergency, you're not really taking away any rights a person has. They still can contest it.
Yes.
That gives them a 30-day time period in which if they want to run in and ask for an injunction or something like that, they would have that delayed time period. Judge still could grant an injunction and all that. So you're not really taking away rights. You're just not giving them time, the 30 days in order to do something before we cut that check.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Malarski. Yes, thank you.
Colleagues, anything else? I think for me, I would just, as I said last week, reiterate, I have a general discomfort with waiver and emergency, but I certainly understand we are given broad discretion in the charter and in council rules for these sorts of matters. So I think it would be a general ask to, as we can, avoid it as we can moving forward. But I appreciate the update, well, the general update, and then also the work on this contract from the city attorney and the administration, the mayor, everybody involved, so thank you. For this one, on for consent, or, no? Okay, on the regular agenda then for emergency and waiver. Everybody good with that? All right. Thank you, Director Schultz. Item D, items from the Department of Parks and Recreation. Director, I don't think we've seen you yet this year.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
You look different.
Happy New Year, happy Valentine's Day, you know, got to go through the list.
My winter
for-
hair. Well, good evening. In 2022, the council approved funding through the American Rescue Plan for the research and evaluation of a multi-use trail connection from Shaw Park to the new Metropolitan Library Gahanna branch. Using the information that we gained from that information, the Department of Parks and Recreation is seeking alternative funding for the construction of that project, going through Clean Ohio Conservation Funds. The grant does require a resolution of authorization in order as part of that application. So administration is respectfully requesting a resolution of authorization to apply for the Clean Ohio Conservation Funds.
Thank you, Director. Colleagues? I'll just say I continue to be impressed by, since I joined council a little over a year ago, the number of opportunities where the various departments are seeking outside funding and being good stewards of our constituent dollars, as the mayor just said on the previous item. So thank you for that. I think this is great. Everybody okay with consent agenda? Oh, sorry, Mrs. McGregor.
I just, what kind of a bridge are they going to have over Rocky Fork?
That is actually part of the evaluation. There are 3 different options. There's basically a pedestrian walkway. There's also a kind of like a boardwalk. But this, the most, the one that we like the most is, of course, one that could be drivable with steel reinforcements. So that would be the continued evaluation as we move forward with the project.
The only concern I have is that, like, when they did the one over the Big Walnut, I mean, it's you can't go, when the water's high, it's a impediment to canoers or kayakers or whatever. It's a drowning trap. And I would like to avoid that. I know the flow is not as great on Rocky Fork, but still.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McGregor. Consent okay on this one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, next item, Director.
Thank you. I actually provided a good segue. The city applied for and was successful at gaining $100,000 for the renovation of a property located at 94 Price Road through state capital funding. We recently received the signed agreement, which does require the funding to be hosted in a separate account. So I will actually be returning to committee in February to request for that. But over the course of the last 2 years, the Parks and Recreation Department has been working in coordination with M&A Architects to create a plan to transform that property into a recreation program center. We are finalizing those documents and are prepared to go to bid at the end of Q1. So administration is respectfully requesting permission to bid the Price Road project.
Anything from council? All right, consent okay for that one as well? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Item E, items from the Department of Finance.
Good evening.
Good evening, Director.
So in front of you have a request for supplemental appropriation. This is related to a lawsuit filed by a former employee. The claim is covered by our insurance, but we are required to pay and then request reimbursement. Reimbursement has already been made. Since it was not settled before the 2023 appropriations were passed, it wasn't included, which is why we're requesting the supplemental appropriations now for $70,000. $21,932.25 to full-time IT wages, and $48,067.75 to law professional services.
Anything from council? Okay, on for first and then consent. All right, thank you. Thank you, Director. Items F, looks like we got several items from the Department of Engineering. Good evening, Director.
Good evening.
Are we going to start with the update on the 2022 sidewalk maintenance program?
Yes. Start with the update on the 2022 sidewalk program. Just for illustration here, this is the program area. There are 24, 25 streets in the program. This was presented to City Council back in July of 2022. To provide some general context, the 2021 program was recently bid. Continuously do that. The 2021 program was recently bid and awarded to a contractor, Newcomer Concrete, here in January. So we really have not been through a full cycle of a program. So we're kind of in the infancy of the sidewalk maintenance program. Stepping into the 2022 program, the field assessments were conducted in the fall of last year prior to the budget being, prior to any of the budgeting, or after the budgeting. And those efforts concluded in December, and we started vetting the information that was available from the roughly 619 properties within the program area. So within the program area, our engineer's estimate is $2.3 million of construction activity, probable cost based off of what we learned from the 2021 bids. Yeah, it looks like it's still timing. Okay. I thought I took that out.
Everybody needs Kevin.
Okay. So we have roughly 2.3, when you add the 10% contingency on top of that, about 2.5 million in projected cost associated with the 2022 program area. We have approximately 900,000 available for overall construction as a part of what we budgeted for. We did not have the benefit of the inventory associated with the assessments that had been conducted in the field, nor the bid results from the 2021 program. So the 2022 program has 21% more deficiencies than the 2022 program has 21% more deficiencies than the 2021 program area otherwise did. The 2021 program actually came in at 9.7%, higher than the engineer's estimate. So we've got some compounding items that kind of come into play here as we're looking at the program. So, you know, really, if we step through things systematically and through a cadence, we would have gone through the 21 program, had all of the 2022 data available to be able to inform what a true cost or a true projected cost of construction would have been, to bring that forward within the budget and actually budget accordingly for the streets that we were presenting to fit within a programmed budget amount that we could afford. So stepping through, we articulated this in 3 program areas that are the approximate same size number of parcels. So program area 1 has 189 parcels on Agler, Codette, Lincolnshire, North Creekway, and South Creekway. Here you can see the estimate for without contingency, with contingency, what the property owner's probable cost would be, and the city's cost. And this will carry forward on the next 2 slides as well. Program area 2 of 3, 224 properties, streets listed below. Engineer's estimate 774 without contingency, and 851,000 with contingency. Similar with program area 3, 205 parcels, streets listed. Engineer's estimate probable cost 764 and change, with contingency 841,000 and projected cost. So presenting to you here this evening, I see it as we have a couple of options available to us. One would be to move forward with the 2022 program. In doing so, that would require in excess of 1.6 million in a supplemental appropriation if none of the property owners were otherwise to opt out of the program and be a part of the assessment process. We could scale the program down to one of 3 to kind of fit within the budget. Another option would be to scale it down to 2 of the 3. You still require a supplemental appropriation of approximately 800,000. And another option is that we pause the 2022 program and utilize technology to capture deficiencies citywide and create a baseline with a baseline understanding of where all the deficiencies are in the order of magnitude cost associated with a program such as this. Technology does exist that we're hoping to deploy here in 2023. This is one, our sidewalk program and our street maintenance program. We're looking to use enhanced technology that is more efficient and cost-effective. This technology is like 3D point cloud. It's on a Segway scooter. It's capturing through laser scanning processes. It's capturing cross slope defects and so forth as it traverses across each one of our sidewalks should we deploy such a system. Our present cost per parcel is about $105 per parcel to capture the raw data. In doing something such as this, we'd be less than $30 a parcel. So if you look at the cost associated with capturing the entire city, there's approximately 9,300 parcels with sidewalk in the community. So we'd be spending just under $1 million just in data capture, whereas we could capture this information for $250,000 with the added benefit of capturing our ADA ramps as well. So I strongly believe in this technology and something that I look forward to deploying throughout the city, capturing the information, and it'll be more informative as we look towards 2024 programs and beyond to otherwise program the capital needs and the assessment process going forward. Similarly, this is a scanning technology that will scan our pavements, our pavement rating. While I can relate to this because when I was working here before, I can recall going out in the field, driving each street, stopping, rating, coming back to the office, delivering it to staff to enter into a database. And it took 3-4 months just to capture all that. We got more automated with a GPS tablet capturing the information shortly thereafter. But that's still time consuming. Now we've got technology that they can drive the streets, capture the information, and have it readily available for us to use and budget accordingly. So we're looking to deploy technologies such as this going forward to help make informative decisions on not only sidewalk program, but our street and roadway curb ratings here in the city. So staff's recommendation is to place a pause on the 2022 program. And again, just to pause, capture the information through the ULAR or ULIP technology to capture that information, understand what the base condition is, and then allow a program to be put in place that it has criteria that is based on our priorities. So if there are areas that are within proximity to a school, proximity to a park, that we put a higher priority and ranking on those areas so that we're putting those dollars forward in those areas that are likely to see a higher pedestrian volume in those areas. And so with that, just presenting the information that I have available at this time, and open for any comments, suggestion, and open a dialogue in regards to what folks think is the best path forward.
Mr. Schnitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. So I guess essentially two questions. Would pausing the program based on staff's recommendation, would that sort of reorder the naming of them so that we kind of avoid some of the confusion that we've historically?
We definitely plan on having the 2024 program actually occur in 2024.
And then I guess on a more serious note, the way the program has been delivered to council, at least one of the aspects thus far has been that the sidewalk program would essentially follow the street program, but with some delay. And I believe the driving factor behind that, no pun intended, is the ADA ramps. So I was just curious how this recommendation might alter that prior, I guess, objective?
Well, so the way I'm looking at it is that when we go forward with our 2024 program, that the street program actually is in the same target areas, or we may have some areas that are in proximity to, say, a school, that we're capturing that information and being in a position this summer to know where those areas are, so that when we head into the budget cycle, that, you know, we're looking towards, okay, these are the areas that we're targeting for 2024. And then in the fall of 2023, that we would be providing notice to those areas that, hey, you have a deficiency on your property, you have the opportunity to take corrective action on your own accord. Again, you know, the sidewalks are a homeowner, property owner responsibility. Give them the opportunity to take corrective action through the fall up through to Thanksgiving, and those that do not perform the work then are otherwise in the program and would be a part of the 2024 street maintenance program, or street program that would have maintenance, reconstruction, and all that activity would occur in the same scope and breadth of that project.
So just to clarify, this recommendation would not implement a policy or a practice whereby sidewalk work is being done and then some subsequent time later, 2 years, 5 years, coming in and redoing a street and essentially tearing up what is in essence relatively new sidewalk work.
I would
make sure
not,
that that's
no.
Okay, all right, perfect. That's all I needed to know.
Ms. Bowers?
Just going back to the options slide and understanding what the department's recommendation is, but just thinking about what these options are, with the concept of selecting one program area or selecting 2 program areas, how would we do that? Is there a proposal on how the 2 or 1 of the 3 would be selected?
So I would have to take a hard look at those program areas. One area that I think it was the first option that was shown, it had properties along Agler Road, so you have a mix of commercial properties in there with residential properties. And I know that there's some work occurring over around Cadet. So program area 1, I would say, would likely drop out, and I would have to take a harder look between 2 and 3.
And would you try to employ the same kinds of principles in terms of access to schools and parks? Is that how you would make
Correct.
that evaluation?
Yes.
Have homeowners been quoted any potential costs on any of these yet?
No, they have not.
Okay, all right.
That, if we were going forward with 1, 2, or 3, all 3 of the program areas, that would be next on the agenda, would be the resolution of necessity, and then request for permission to bid, and then all the notification process then would come thereafter. Where we have that information where we could provide that, but at this point, the order of magnitude was merited a conversation with council.
If we were to scale back to what you determined to be the highest priority area of the 3 program areas that were identified, could we do that 1 program area in addition to moving forward with the technology, the new
Yes,
technology deployment?
We could.
So we wouldn't lose a whole year, I guess, is my thinking.
Well, technically, we're doing the 21 program in 23, so we are doing work this year, but we could add one of the program areas in to show good faith effort.
I think Mr. Brenner had his hand up.
Yeah, so I didn't know Ms. Bowers actually was going to ask that last part, but that's sort of where I want to probe a little bit more. The Segway technology, I don't remember what it was called. How long does that actually take?
So We would enter in a contract and they could have the information available to us over the summer. So we'd likely have the information, say, late June, early July.
And but that's doing the citywide analysis,
Correct.
correct? Yeah. So, but if we were, wanting to use some smarts about, we know certain regions of the city that are probably going to be really bad, and maybe we can use one of those technologies for a quick analysis, and I don't mean to say quick as in it's going to subjugate the perimeters of the testing. I'm just saying a shorter time span, and be able to try to piecemeal, if you will. I mean, I do share with Councilwoman Bowers that I don't want to lose time, and so I'm just trying to understand is there a different way that we actually gain here? I don't even know if those areas that you had programmed, areas 1, 2, or 3, are even the next set of priorities. And maybe that's what you're wrestling with.
So a couple things. We have within the budget money available to do this, not only the pavement, but the sidewalk rating within the budget. So that's independent from the construction activities. One thing is the mobilization, remobilization to piecemeal that data collection. I'd rather have them come in and capture it all at once, because otherwise we're paying for cost for each time that they come into town. They're coming in from St. Louis, so they'd have to come into town, set up operation, and then leave, come back, and so it's less efficient.
So, but you do think that there is a way that we can actually still do that, but try to pick something and be smart about it, a smaller area for a sidewalk project?
So what I would do is I would look at the two of the three areas and look at those streets, see proximity to schools, parks, and start looking at that criteria that would start to weight force that criteria to lend itself to one program area over another.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Mrs. Angelou?
Well, I was just wanting to hear all of what he just said, but is EMH&T still involved in this?
EMH&T is still involved within the 2021 and 22 program, so they have been doing the on-site inspection activities for, or capturing the data, and are under contract to provide the construction administration and inspection services as the work is performed.
And that would continue on?
Well, we would have the data available from this technology, so the upfront assessment wouldn't necessarily be required, but then a local firm could otherwise be used for the construction administration and inspection services. So we would use local resources for those activities.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Mrs. McGregor?
If it's, I know engineering's been really taxed with the amount of work. If it's not too much, I would prefer doing one program this year just to keep going. Like, I know it's been such a slow start. We've been so slow rolling it out, and not through anybody's fault. It's just the new program. But I would prefer to do one this year and then do the next year the new, if it's possible, if you think it's possible.
One program area? 'Cause
One
of the-
program area.
So
Instead
of the three, kind of
of
the three program
yeah,
areas this
just to
year?
do one. And at least it would keep us moving, and so we don't have 1 year and then we stop, and then people feel like, why did I have to do that, and the next people don't, and so just, I mean, that'd be my preference.
Mrs. Padova?
I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So this Segway technology you guys are using, that's being done regardless of what happens,
That
correct?
is the intent, that along with the pavement rating to capture that data for us to make informative decisions on our CIP as well as the sidewalk program going forward. Yes.
Okay, so regardless of what we do with the 2022 program, that is going to be capturing everything, and that will kind of redefine what 2024 is going to be and moving forward.
Correct.
Okay, so we just need to decide for this year whether we want to go over budget, stay under budget, reduce the area, or, okay. I think that I would agree with Ms. McGregor as well with wanting to do a smaller area just to keep things rolling. But I am really excited about the use of this technology to capture the whole city and make sure that we're putting our dollars in the right places.
I think without reiterating, or repeating what my colleagues have said, I think I would be inclined to see one of the program areas move forward while at the same time, using this technology to see those deficiencies citywide. I think one of the things I've grappled with a bit with the sidewalk program and the street program generally is how we arrive at the different areas. It seems piecemeal, and to me, the question I get is, wouldn't it just be better to pick one area and do that one area from a cost efficiency standpoint rather than, one street here, one street on the east side, one street on the south side, and moving that way. So I think the use of this technology would be helpful in explaining that, one, but also in gathering that necessary data. But that said, would still like to see a program area of those three move forward for the reasons that have been previously stated. Mrs.
Would it be
McGregor.
possible to do a even if it's not specifically one of these listed, but maybe a combination if you decide like one's near a school or like we said, a park or something like that? I mean, just keeping the same amount, it wouldn't have to be specifically 1, 2, or 3, but maybe some out of 2 and some out of 3.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
We have the data and that granularity, so it's just a matter of filtering the data set to come up with those areas that meet the criteria of being in proximity to a school, a park, so forth.
You gonna follow up, Mrs. Bowers?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Director, are there cons, drawbacks to kind of where we're headed? And please feel free to tell us if you think that we're maybe suggesting something that's not comfortable with the department.
No, not from my standpoint. I mean, last year's program was 200, or the one we just bid and are about to start was 219 parcels, and I believe the 3 program areas were anywhere from 190 to 225, so it would be consistent with the program that we just led.
Okay, thank you.
If I could
Mayor.
actually, Director, given Councilwoman McGregor's question, with regard to if you could look at it and then find parcels that maybe were near schools, et cetera, what would that do in terms of your cost analysis? Right now, we have 3 defined program areas based on the prior street program. And you're able to parcel out, we know it's going to be this and this and this. So would you have to kind of mix and match?
If you look at the map, we're kind of all over the board in regards to where these particular segments are. There's 24, 25 roadways in what was the 2022 program area. So I don't see that being a challenge.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I understand what you're going to need to do this.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, for that clarification. Anything else on this topic? Director, do you feel, sorry.
It's not a comment about the program, but when you said about people wanting to do an area, why don't you do one whole area at a time? You have to think about the consequences, that the whole area would be blocked off with barrels everywhere and nobody would be able to go anywhere. So that's kind of why they spread it out, so that one area is not totally blocked from their homes for weeks.
And also so that it's actually in all different wards around the city, so you don't have one ward saying either why are you doing this to me, or why don't I get to be in this? And that was always the thought around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Director, I thank you, and Mayor, thank you for restating, because that is exactly what I was asking. Because wasn't sure. I'm still not believing that those 3 program areas that are already defined are probably the right ones that we should target. So going after, and I join Councilwoman McGregor, going and using, like I said earlier, using our smarts about it, I think that there are definitely a program area that we can actually devise and still use the Segway technology overall. Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. Director, administration, do you feel you have a good sense of the will of council on this?
As long as Director Comlink is good, I'll be good.
I do.
Okay, well, thank you, colleagues. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I don't know that anybody really asked this, but I guess why was it your suggestion to just completely scratch this one rather than going with one like we're talking about doing?
So partially based on capturing the information from the pavement rating as well as the sidewalk work. If we, as I understand the program, how it was initially set up was going back 15, 16 years to previous projects that occurred in the community. If you look at pavement cycles and treatments that may otherwise be needed, to a point made earlier, we could be coming up on a mill and overlay cycle on these particular streets coming due within 3 to 5 years of us actually performing the work on doing the sidewalk work here, where, okay, that would have been the opportune time to address the wheelchair ramps at intersections as opposed to doing that now. So that's part of the reasoning and rationale.
So there would not be duplication. We could avoid that.
Okay. Good to move on to the action items, I think.
And we still have a finance meeting, too.
Yes, we do.
I was going to say, hopefully the next one, a couple do not have very much in the way of them. First item is we've been working, our staff's been working on roadway drainage-related issues on East Johnstown Road. We recently have been in contact with 2 of the property owners. There was not sufficient right-of-way to accommodate the improvements for the stormwater drainage. We've got easements prepared, property owners signed off, and we're looking to accept those easements to facilitate some drainage improvements along East Johnstown Road. And then the next agenda item is requesting permission to bid those improvements along East Johnstown Road.
Questions, comments from colleagues? I just want to say it's good to see that these long-standing, no pun intended, drainage issues are being addressed. You know, as noted in your report that was submitted, there's only so much that private property owners can do, and I really do appreciate the attention to this. The folks here at these properties were one of the first residents who reached out to me when I was first elected. So glad to see this on the agenda and moving forward. Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Yeah, Director, I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to ask about sidewalks in this area. Do you know if these particular parcels already have existing sidewalks?
They do not.
And if they are going to be, if we are having a right-of-way easement, is there a potential opportunity for the installation of sidewalks?
So with that, I think we'd have to take a larger look at the corridor to see what drainage well, not only the drainage improvements, but the roadway profile to get like curb and gutter installed and changing it from side ditch drainage to curb and gutter section and your traditional tree lawn area with sidewalk or multi-use path. And that's something else that we need to take into consideration is whether it's a corridor for a multi-use path as well.
Is that something that once we've from a technical perspective once we've,
I think I understand where you're going.
Okay.
The underlying infrastructure would be there to otherwise support those improvements in the future.
and from a legal perspective with the easements as well, that would give us the potential right to
So
make those improvements?
the easement, I believe, was explicit to storm sewer, not necessarily to cover sidewalk.
Would the mechanism be similar if we were to approach that in the future in terms of thinking that through? Or is it something that could be amended?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I understand the question. Can you?
I think that, well, the idea is that if we've got some tracks that are, track parcels that are, have no sidewalk currently, and they don't have sufficient right-of-way, so we're accepting these deeds of easement in order to do right-of-way work. Is there the potential, since to avoid a second touch, essentially, to do the easement such that it gives us future access to install sidewalks or multipurpose path?
My understanding was whenever we rebuild a street, then we add sidewalks if there are no sidewalks there, not just resurface it, but rebuild it. That's the way it was explained to me. And that's when we add the sidewalks. Is that, or is that not answer the question?
If I'm understanding you, right now, we're looking to obtain an easement in order to do utility work within that area.
Correct.
Councilwoman is asking whether or not, if we then 3, 5, 10 years from now want to go back and put a multi-use trail or a sidewalk, would that easement suffice, or should we look at this opportunity to have a broader easement so that we can anticipate that need in the future? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That's perfect.
And I don't have the easement up in front of me. Does it specifically only relate to utilities?
I
at this
believe
time?
so,
Yeah,
yes.
because it seems like that's the way it was when we went over it, so.
Is it this one?
Yeah.
Would appear, though, if they want to have sidewalks, I mean, these people are living there without sidewalks, and perhaps that's what they want.
I think the easement is explicit to the drainage.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, yeah, if you wanted to make it more encompassing, we would have to change the terms of the easement, but I don't know why we couldn't, other than it may prevent them from agreeing to an easement under those circumstances. That would be the only thing I could think of.
On a property or a project that would cover wholesale improvements to the roadway itself and contemplating curb and gutter and so forth, typically it would be far stretched past these two parcels, and we would have acquisitions as a part of that effort of the bigger project, similar to work that is occurring at Taylor Station and Claycraft right now, where we've got 4 parcels that we're securing permanent right-of-way and temporary construction easements, so we would handle that at the time.
So you're saying that since this is so limited to just this amount, it's probably not worth it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, good. I'm glad we talked through that. Okay.
Gregor.
Is this where, I'm looking at the map, is this where there's already, like, they've started to do some work there? They've put it in the gully there along the road. There's 2 houses where they've started to put a storm sewer pipe or some kind of pipe drainage there.
I don't recall them putting pipe in, but it's been a while since I've been on
It's hard
site.
to, well, you drive by and it's like this pipe, they've been doing some work and they dug it out and there's just a pipe sitting there. But I can't tell from the map if it's there or not. I'll have to drive by and look at the addresses.
I think it's that property owner. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, all right. Looks like they got in over their head, maybe.
Anything else on, I think we can do the first 2 together. Well, I guess the first one, is an ordinance, so waiving second reading and declaring an emergency on that. Everyone okay with consent for those? And then consent for the motion as well? Does that work? Okay, third item, Director.
Requesting permission to bid Claycraft Waterline, another project that we were hoping to start last year, but are just getting underway now.
That was the quickest item yet. Anything from colleagues?
Go for it.
Consent, good with that one? All right, final item under F, Director.
As a part of improvements that are occurring north on Hamilton Road, City of Columbus, they did improvements on Morris Road, which as a part of those improvements, there are additional easements associated with that work that are within Gahanna's jurisdiction that we're requesting acceptance of those easements.
Colleagues? All right, on for first and then consent?
Yep.
All right, anything else for Committee of the Whole? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. McGregor. I keep,
I just thought of one question on the water line for Claycraft. Is that the whole of Claycraft all the way?
Yes, it is.
Jim remembered doing part of it. Is part of it like down where the brick factory was, because the effluent or the outflow of it was real acidic and it had damaged part of it, and so they did a part of it. Does it?
So the water line is going from Morrison Road all the way to Taylor Station Claycraft, and we're coordinating the efforts of the roundabout project with
Okay.
with this project.
Okay,
So it's the entire length.
okay.
so I think we settled on first and consent for the fourth item. Anything else? Seeing nothing, we will adjourn Committee of the Whole.
Jeremy, if you'll just give me a thumbs up when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.